Okay. I can see it. Okay, we had some issues setting up the studio, but we should be good to go now. Um, just sent the. Setting up the studio. Just sent the should be good to go now.
Because it's you're hearing from your phone.
Oh, so I need to move this out the way or
Muted or something.
how you do that? I made it here. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Trying to figure this stuff out. Um, waiting on our guest now to join. I just sent the link. This is all brand new to me. Setting up this way. Where did I share it to? Okay, I shared it here. I think I shared it. 1 second. Trying to get this together. Appreciate everyone's patience. Now, trying to bring my guest in. I see him. How do I add him in there? Okay. I'm just figuring this stuff out. Can you hear me?
I hear something. I'm having a difficult time hearing you here.
Because I can hear you.
Oh, that's why. It's using. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you clear.
Okay, good. I can hear you.
You can hear me.
It's not using the headset though. Coming from the computer. So you don't need the headset.
I don't need the headset.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Everything you can hear, it's not coming through the headset.
Oh, okay.
If you need it, you can take that up. But are you fine with just?
I'm fine without it. I guess it look good. Okay, so we're finally live. Sorry everybody for the delay. Thanks to my brother-in-law from the motherland, from Senegal. Um, close word, what's it, the door of no return, where our ancestors entered through. My mother was able to visit there last year and take some pictures there. You know, a very important site, location as far as our history. Um, so my sister married a who we think is a great brother from Senegal, and he has been a blessing to our family. It's been a big blessing, you know, and his family is close to the CC family. His father developed a relationship with the big Sheikh Ibrahim Niasse, who was well known across the world and like has millions of followers. You mean? And so when his father was a student in in France, and he met him and he developed such a bond that the Sheikh sent his family to whenever they were coming to the Car Senegal, he told his family to go and stay with their family, to stay with my brother-in-law's family. So my brother-in-law was able to meet Sheikh Hassan Sisi, you know, his brother, and some other family members because they would host them to me. So imagine the blessings of that. So we have with us our brother Rais Mujahid, and as a topic, gaslighting the Black Muslim man. Um, with the delay, I think we get right into it. Brother, if you can give some introduction just about yourself, you mean to make the audience familiar, and then we'll go from there.
All right, assalamu alaikum. I just one of the reasons I've become quite I don't want to say famous, but I've become quite popular regarding this topic is because I had a couple of years ago a situation in a divorce where I had some mental health issues, and through researching those issues for the last 2 years now, I've become very adept at at mental health, particularly as it pertains to Black men in general, but understanding the nuances of narcissistic abuse and several of the other cluster B personality disorders. And so through that process, as I tend to do with many processes that I go through throughout life, I've been a logistics manager for almost 2 decades now. And so learning processes, learning how things operate, learning how things work, I was able to use those skills to also learn about narcissism, gaslighting, and the mental health effects of that Black men in America tend to go through as a result of our context. And so that would be one of the reasons that I've become quite popular with people, trying to explain to them like what gaslighting is, what narcissistic abuse is, because sometimes we have a general understanding of narcissism, but not a real nuanced and in-depth understanding of it. And so in my process of learning, I've also took to allowing my platform to operate as a teaching mechanism as well. And so that's how I end up here. Like I said, I've been a logistics manager for 20 years. And I also been a Muslim for about 20 years. I converted about 20 years ago. And so I hope to add some value to the subject matter here.
Alhamdulillah. I think it's something that's really needed as far as us having our version of the story amongst Black Muslims as far as the subject. But I forgot to, let me start, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammadin, Allahumma salli ala Ibrahim wa ali Ibrahim, innaka hamidun majid, Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammadin, Allahumma barik ala Ibrahim wa ali Ibrahim, innaka hamidun majid. Just to give the proper introduction, and so we hope for Allah's mercy and his guidance in this, and that anything that we say will be truthful and we have the sincere intention throughout. So just wanted to add that in. So can you give us because a lot of people are just coming to know about some of these terms, and it's a very, very important term. The term gaslighting, just what does it mean in general?
So I'm gonna try to provide a context, because sometimes we're so gaslighting comes from a 1944 movie, I believe, where a man had married a woman. If you know anything about narcissistic abuse goes through a process which is described as love bombing, devalue, and then discard. And so in the movie, the man like love bombed this woman to get her to fall deeply in love with him. And then once he got her hooked in, he started playing these like mental games with her. And so the reason the movie was called Gaslighting, because she would go around the house. So this is the 1940s. They used gas lanterns to light the house. So she would go throughout the house and turn on the gas lanterns. And then he would come in behind her and turn the lanterns off, either turn them off or dim them down a lot. And so she would come to him and say, like, I know I just turned all of these lanterns on. Do you know anything about why they're going off? And he's like, no, I don't know anything. You must be losing your mind, because I don't even remember you turning them on. And so his objective through the entire movie is to get her to question her own sanity. And as such, once she questions her own sanity, then her sanity is in his hands, because she has to come to him to understand what reality is. And at that point, he can manipulate her. And that's the origin of the movie there. I just want to read a quote here real quick,
Okay.
so that will kind of put this entire conversation in its proper context. Give me 1 second here. I'm sorry. So there was an author by the name of Eric Byrne, Dr. Eric Byrne, and he's known as the father of transactional analysis. And so he has, trying to find it here. I had it earlier. I should have photoshopped it. If I find it, I'll read it later. But the point is that Dr. Eric Byrne separates our perspective of life into two categories, so that we experience life in games or we experience life in intimacy. And obviously, most people want to have intimate relationships where we connect with each other at an intimate level. And but most people play games. And so when you understand that, then you understand how gaslighting functioned as a tool in this game that people play. And so that's why we're here to have this conversation. We're here to have this conversation in regards to the games that are being played. So I can give you an example here. So when we talk about, is it okay if I just jump right into the subject?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we talk about the games that are being played, right? So one of the things he talks about in the games that people play is that a game is being played when a discount is on the table. So a discount means that some information, some idea is taking off of the table. That's what it means to discount. When you discount something, you take away from the price, you reduce the price. Mm-hmm. And so a game is being played when a reduction or a discount is available. And so I in the Muslim circles, right, there's particularly as it pertains to America, right, there's two Muslim camps, if you will, in America. There's the indigenous community, which is predominantly African American, and then you have the immigrant community, which comes from a myriad of cultural backgrounds, right, whether it's Africa, whether it's Asia, whatever the case may be, but they're immigrant Muslims. And when they come here, they have a cultural practice that's considered Islamic, right, regarding divorce. And so there's a way in which in the immigrant community, if you divorce a woman, she kind of loses her status. Mm-hmm. And so what I've seen happening is that idea being swept over the indigenous Muslim community as well. But it's not actually the reality. So when I talk about a discount, we talk about divorce in the Muslim community and the woman losing her status, but that is not the case for the indigenous or the African-American Muslim woman. She does not lose her status. So you'll find in the African-American community where you'll have sisters who are married 3 and 4 and 5 times, right? Where this would not be an acceptable practice in immigrant Muslim communities. But the lessons that are being taught about African-American Muslims is the same lessons that are being taught about immigrant Muslims, but it's a different scenario. And so what is happening then is that this idea is being promoted amongst indigenous Muslims as if we have the same type of context and scenario. And I've been in masjids where sisters, like all the sisters, and when I say all, I mean all the sisters have been married at least 3 times. And what happens is the men in those communities become transient. They come into the community, they marry the sister, and when that marriage inevitably dissolves, the brother is gone, the sister remains in the community, and another brother comes into that community. So you have this series of brothers in and out of the community. But the lessons that are being taught as if we are immigrant Muslims, right? So when I hear people speak about divorce, when I hear people talk about family structures, they're talking as if we have the same context of the predominant ideology of Islam. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
And so we end up, so when you talk about gaslighting, then what is happening is there are ideas that are being used and perpetuate to control us that don't apply to us. And so in a way, we kind of submit to those ideas anyway. But so when I talk about gaslighting, we need to talk about the technical ideas of gaslighting. So gaslighting is designed to confuse, to brain fog, to self-doubt, disorientate, create paranoia, fear, terror, feeling like you're losing your mind, difficulty making judgments and decisions, second guessing your memory, and feeling like you aren't enough. And this can create nervous breakdowns.
Wow.
And so when you understand, like, sometimes what happens is, right, I've been in contexts where I've heard about brothers abusing, like physically abusing the sisters, right? And we all take the right and appropriate position regarding that. We all take the right and appropriate position, right? Because none of us wants our sisters to be hit on and beat on, right? And so I've seen brothers come to defense of sisters, as they should. But what happens is the abuse of brothers, because it's not concrete abuse, it's more of a psychological abuse, right? Manipulating him with his children, initiating. I know this is gonna sound unfavorable to people, but initiating unreasonable divorces, right? Mm-hmm. So in America, they have this idea of irreconcilable differences, which I don't know, it could mean anything, right? And for men, our families, our children, our marriages, those are a major part of our identity, right? Because Allah gives us as men a very great responsibility as being men, as being husbands, and things of that nature. And then what you see is there's this minimizing of that role and responsibility in regards to the family when women want to be a part of the Western structure, right, to initiate this irreconcilable differences. And typically, I tend not to have a problem with that until children are involved. Yeah. Like when children are, go ahead.
Hold that thought, because you can't see the chat right now. I don't know if you can see the chat.
No.
Okay, now somebody has a question.
Yes.
They said, so does the ex-husband still remain in the picture even though they are remarried?
That's not a part of that's typically not a part of the plan, right? When you say transient, it means once the ex-husband is out of the picture, there needs to be space for the new husband to come in, right? And so a part of the nature of the relationship between the husband and the ex-wife is creating circumstances that makes it difficult for him to be the man he needs to be in the context of his relationship to his children. So the children may or may not have a relationship with him, but it's really, it's this term out there called uncle dad. He falls into an uncle dad category where in the marriage he's dad, but in the co-parenting situation he becomes the uncle dad. And many of us have, because we have accepted the idea of this transient nature of our relationship to our women and children, where men come in and out, then there can be no masculine structure that allows for him to have the appropriate relationship with his children. I'm not an Islamic scholar, but when you study the religion, fathers are supposed to be the authority of their children. And there is some debate on what the nature of the relationship is, like who the children go with or who the children stay with, right? There's some debate back and forth. But in the American context, there is no debate. The children are staying with the mother, and the father is not the authority of those children.
Yes, and I would say it's even different than when I was growing up, because those people that were those Muslim men and women that were in situations of remarriage, they were coming from a generation of a time when black people were still marrying at a higher rate than white people, and the men were men. You mean whatever right. Arrangements they had after divorce and remarrying, the men arranged where the kids went.
Right.
Where the kids with the men arranged that. So it's a totally different thing than today.
Yeah, that's not the context today. We essentially, like when you talk about, we're Muslim. Allah says in the Quran that men are the protectors and the maintainers of the women, and he gives very specific reasons why that is the case. But in this context, in a Western context, particularly as it pertains to America, right, there is some fortification of women's authority over her children, right? So she gets to decide what the context of that relationship is going to be. So if the father is going to relate to his children, it's going to be kind of in a lesser role than as intended by Allah, right? And so there's a way where you could call this situation sort of a shirk situation, right? Because it's usurping the authority of Allah, right? Allah says that the father is supposed to be the authority over those children, but that's not what we are doing. And so, what ideally in this system, particularly as it pertains to African Americans, where women are bringing men in and out of these family structures, like she's the only stagnant part of the system, right? The kids know mom, but then you have one dad in, one dad out, one dad in, one dad out. And there is no context where you're going to have men co-authority of a family structure, right? It's going to create a greater level of conflict. And so that's why I said the circumstances are created to push these men out and minimize their authority in order to have the new guy who comes in be the authority. So unlike in immigrant communities, when a woman divorced, most men will not marry a divorced woman, and most men particularly won't marry a divorced woman with children. So there's a way in which, even though they're divorced, the woman and the child still depends on the father. And what you often hear is kind of a deadbeat dad situation where she can't get remarried and this guy is not being responsible for his responsibilities. But that's not our situation. And that's what, when the gaslighting comes in, is that we get presented as that, but that's really not the case. There is no context in which a father moves out of the family system in the Muslim community as it pertains to us and still have the authority over the children that he had when he was in that family system. And that's intentional. I don't think the individual women are doing it intentionally, but the way that the system is set up, it can't respect the order that Allah has imposed upon us. And so sometimes we create a situation where men can't be a part of their children's life as men, right? I mean, the reality is it's difficult for a woman to surrender to the authority of the father while she's looking for another man. Like this, just socially, it's just unlikely to be the case where that's going to happen. And so when you talk about are men still involved with the children, the way the system is set up, it's not set up for men to be involved with the children. And that's the part that I've never heard anybody really talk about. So there are things that are happening with my children now, with my children from my previous situation, where the women are doing what they want with the children and nobody asked them. I don't think that his father would be okay with that, right? This is not a statement that you hear people make. Why? Because my authority is not over my children in that manner. Right. My authority with my children is when they are with me. So if my children come with me and spend, I don't know, dad spend weekends and summers with their children, then I have some authority over my children. But when they go back to the mom, that's their real life. That's their real home. So it's what mom says. And that's going to be based on whoever mom has in the house. Even if she has nobody in the house, she's in charge. So ultimately, she's in charge of the new guy in the house, of me and the children. That's not an ideal structure for men. And so that's why we oftentimes get men opting out, and nobody says that.
So she followed up. She said, thank you. That was interesting, but is it that the best interest of the children or the interest of the new husband in the relationship? I think she's talking about what we just discussed, this explanation that we gave. Is that in the best interest of the children or in the interest of the new husband in a relationship? But if she's referring to Islam, then we know that Islam does it for the best interest of the children. You mean where you don't even have when she remarries the father, you mean he gets custody, you mean, or somebody in the close family, depending on the school thought, but she loses custody when she remarries for the best interest of the children. And that's the Islamic position.
Right. And nobody's, I mean, let's be realistic. You don't hear women talking about, I tried to give the children to him when I got remarried and he wouldn't accept that. That argument is never made, because that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is the new guy comes in, she keeps the children. And, we do this co-parenting thing. Which is, there's no basis for it in the way things are set up. When she remarries, the children need, and when you talk about the best interest of the children, like, people don't know this, or I don't know if they know it. I talk about it all the time. Children are 9 times more likely to be physically and sexually abused by stepdads than their biological dads. And so it's interesting, right, to have that understanding socially in America, and then have Islam say that this is the steps that is supposed to occur when she remarries, and we don't take those steps. And then you have the situation where you have this level of abuse amongst children that is increasing exponentially. Where we follow the Islamic protocol, where the children went with the father, right, upon the mother's remarrying. Now, it doesn't mean that children won't be potentially abused by the new wife, but abuse in most cases, particularly sexual abuse as it pertains to fathers and daughters, stepdads and girls, right, where these situations tend to play themselves out, but also stepdads with sons. Like, if you are, let's put it this way. So we all know about the situation with the Catholic Church, right, where they had this problem with the priest and the boys. But you set up a situation where men can't get married, and then you give those men access to children, then you will have men who come into the priesthood as predators, seeking a context where they gain access to children. Well, if you're a predator, marrying a woman with children is the ideal situation if that's what you are looking for. But in Islam, the idea is to move the children away from those type of circumstances if the woman is going to be remarried. And when you talk about the best interest of the children, here's the problem I have personally, right? This is my personal problem. And I've been trying to do some research on this in regards to Islam too, but I've been having a difficult time finding the information that I need. Marriage is the best circumstance for the children. Marriage is what's best for the children. Their biological and mother being mature adults, working out whatever their conflicts are to be the best they can be for each other, to provide the children with the context that they need to grow, thrive, and develop appropriately, right? That's what's best for the children. Now, that's not always going to be the case, right? There are going to be situations where people are divorcing. But the problem is, and this is so when people speak to me, is because I'm very adept at the data, right? Each divorce increases the chance of divorce. And we're doing all of this in front of the children, right? We get divorced, remarry, divorce, remarry in front of the children. And I think it might have been James Baldwin who said that children learn what they see you do, not what you say. So we can teach our children Islam and all the proper protocol, but what's happening in these relationships that they are dissolving, because marriage is for children. So if you dissolve the marriage, it should be because it's going to be better for the children. And so the idea for me is like, we're going to dissolve the marriage and we're still going to co-parent, right? Which doesn't make sense to me. We're going to dissolve the marriage that was for the children. And then we're still going to have this relationship where we're parenting the children together. And that just doesn't seem, it becomes a transgenerational curse, if you will, right? Children from divorced families, like if two people come together and they're both from divorced family, they have a 200% higher chance of divorce, right? So when you're talking about what are we teaching our children, what are we, and what these relationship dissolutions are going to mean for their mental health, right? So when you talk about the mental health on Black men, there's an exponential promotion of the responsibilities of manhood. So as a father and a husband, I am responsible to teach my son how to be a father and a husband. But what happens when my wife initiates divorce? How am I supposed to teach my son in that context how to be a father and a husband? And so each generation then is getting a man who is less likely and less capable as a result of his family being dissolved, because that's what he learned as a child, right? How to manage relationships and the breakdown of relationships, not in the building up of relationships. And so there are things that we are teaching. There are ways that we are practicing. There are value systems that are counterproductive to what the idea of Islam should be promoting for us. And that's not to say that you can't divorce. It's saying that we need to take divorce a little bit more seriously than we have seemed to. And if we are going to divorce, then there needs to be conversations that are actually based on what's the best interest of the children according to what Allah says, not what America says or the family court says. I mean, obviously the family courts don't care about what the best interests of the children are, right? But if you had children with that man and that man is competent and you are trying to get remarried, or you know you're trying to get remarried, then let's follow the proper protocol so that we can avoid and create circumstances that'll give us the best opportunities. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And once again, to my guests out there, we're in the structure of, I'm gonna call this a Tajani CC structure, because we're in a Sheikh Ibrahim Nias structure, because my brother-in-law, his family has a connection there, so we're hoping for some baraka in this and that y'all can benefit. Now, Dr. Ramadi, she talked about five different types of gaslighting. She talked about the classical one. I can't remember. I was listening to her this morning. If you can remember some of those different types, you mean?
Yeah. So there. Well, it's funny, right? Because when you talk about gaslighting, the first thing you have to know is like, what are the so okay. So one of the guys I follow, his name is Sam Wagner. He wrote a book called Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. Now, let's be clear. It's not only narcissists who use gaslighting, right? But gaslighting is the favorite tool of the narcissist. It's the favorite tool of the narcissist. And one of the reasons why is because it's the most easiest to use. And it could be used in any context. It can be used in a parent-child context. It can be used in a spousal context. It can be used in a religious context, right? You have people who do what they call spiritual gaslighting. And so spiritual gaslighting, and okay, so all of the gaslighting, the point is the same, right? It's the same point. I need to control that other person's mentality, that their mental space. I need to control their mental space. I need to get in there and manipulate that. And so one of the things that I've experienced, even in the time where I had these mental breakdowns as a result of some external factors, right? Where I've had people, like I'm having a mental crisis and people are questioning my faith, my iman. People are questioning my faith. Like, you're not faithful. Like, no, there's stuff that's happening to me. And so what it starts to look like you're crazy, or you not faithful and committed to Allah, right? When a person is having a mental breakdown, number one, there is almost always, I would say like 95% of the time, the person is having a mental breakdown because of external factors, right? There's a certain amount of stress that any human can endure before mentally they start to fall apart, right? Just like there's a certain amount of weight that you can lift physically, like, right? I mean, you can't pray to Allah that you can lift more weight, like physical weight. Like, once you reach the limitations, you're going to need somebody to assist you in that. And that's what empathy is, right? So let's talk about narcissism and empathy, right? They are on a continuum. So on the left side, you'll have narcissism. On the right side, you'll have empathy. So I try to explain to people, like, so where you kind of want to be is at the peak of that continuum, right? Where you have the appropriate amount of self-concern, but also the appropriate amount of concern for others. So Allah says in the Quran, don't extend yourself to the point where you become destitute and blameworthy, right? That means you have went all the way to the right side where you have so much empathy that you're giving, and then it compromises your own integrity. Right, but you don't want to be so narcissistic where it talks about in the Quran that they're niggardly, right? They're close-fisted, so you don't want to be that, right? So there has to be this balance of empathy and self-interest. But for the narcissist, there is no empathy. There's just self-interest. And so that is very destructive. And because of that, they are very adept at manipulating the psychology of other people. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, you can find yourself in a community in a very stressful situation that does not respect your humanness. And they'll use the religion to dehumanize and trivialize the experience that you're going through. And so instead of people connecting with you, right? If you hear somebody's having a divorce, you don't start asking questions like, well, what did you do? Which is what people do to men. If a sister is divorcing you, almost 100% of the time, everybody assumes that it was the man that did something. That is gaslighting. That's gaslighting. Because if you don't know them, and you don't know what the situation is, and you don't know what the circumstances is, why is the default automatically that the man was the problem? And many women destroy families knowing that they have the social support to do so, because everybody's going to, not everybody, but the vast majority of people are going to lean on her side. And so when you talk about spiritual gaslighting, when you talk about gaslighting in general, so there are different types of narcissism, but gaslighting in every realm is always the same in how it's done. And so that's I think it's very important, particularly for us as Muslims, to understand what it means to spiritually gaslight somebody. It's a dehumanizing practice, and that's not what we want to do, right? What we want to do is we want to be able to empathize and connect with the person and what their experience is, to be able to pull from that a lesson that we all can learn and how we need to connect to each other and possibly reduce divorce. Because that's what the important thing is, to keep these families intact, right? Allah says that our responsibility is to protect ourselves and our family from a fire whose fuel is men and stone. Now, how do we do that with divorce? How does divorce factor into us protecting our families? And that's not what we're doing.
So I got my notes. I got my notes. I got this
okay.
Dr. Romney quote, because it was really like, whoa, you know what I mean? So she said, in classical gaslighting, she said, they're denial of your reality. It is a given in a narcissistic relationship that the gaslighting is going to occur, that they're going to use gaslighting. And they hold the power because they control your reality. And gaslighting, she said, gaslighting sets the tone for the relationship. Your reality is denied, and not only is your reality denied, you accept the reality of the other person. And so she said there's a manipulation, emotional abuse, and it sets the tone for the relationship. You want to speak to that?
Yeah. And sets the tone in a way. Remember, the objective is to control the relationship. So whoever is doing the gaslighting, they're trying to have complete control and domination in the relationship. And that's the tone that's being set, right? Where they'll say, so you're in a relationship with somebody and they say, oh, you know how you always forget, right? But I know, but we're talking about this subject and I haven't forgotten. I know what I'm talking about right now. But they're saying you always forget, to throw out into the context the ability to make you say, you're questioning yourself now, like, oh man, did I forget? Like, did I say something that I didn't forget? Like, it's very insidious, and you can't ever pin them down and point out to them, even if you have proof. Like, you have proof that the person said this and they'll still deny and move around and you misinterpret what I said. Like, it's very skillful and crafty, right? In a way that we have to be mindful of that. So yeah, and just for anybody who want to know, if you need to learn about narcissism and gaslighting and all of that stuff, Dr. Ramani does a wonderful job at teaching the fundamentals of narcissism.
Okay. So I'll just read this list that she put out. So she goes withholding. She says silencing yourself in a relationship, fear and doubt of bringing up a topic. She talks about how, like, a child is told, like, you say such and such again, this, I'm going to not do this, I'm going to withhold this. And she's talking about how dangerous that is to a child. You mean that they can lose their love or safety for bringing something up. And then she says contradiction, screwing with your sense of reality by telling you, like you said, you didn't remember such and such correctly. Try to, so you don't remember that correctly. You're doubting your own ability to remember something, and you accept that as reality. Um, and she says diversion, changing the subject to make you look bad. Um, play the guilt card to distract you. If she went to minimization, like
Oh, let me jump in real quick.
okay, go ahead.
So when you talk about diversion, because this is interesting, right? You'll see this happening in many relationships. So let's say something happens in a relationship, and so I have my wife. I bring a concern that I have to my wife um, about, let's say, a friend that she hangs out with that I don't think is good for her. I'm not telling her what to do. I'm just bringing it to her attention. Like, she don't seem like a healthy person, right? And so instead of us talking about that, well, what about your friends? And what about that time you you went to the golf course? And I don't never say nothing when you do stuff, right? It moves like you shocked because you brought this up as a genuine concern, right? As a sincere concern. And then you get this whole avalanche of things that you've done, right? That's really the purpose of this whole list of things, right? They didn't come up when they happened, right? So she saw things in you. And this when you talk about the depthness of it, man, like you're in a relationship with this person and they like taking notes. All right, you did that. Okay, you did that. Okay, you did that. And then when you bring up one thing, it may not even be a big deal. You bring up one thing and then boom, everything on that list, it comes out because they're trying to discredit you. Right. And so it's almost impossible to be in relationships with people like this, right? Because you just in the relationship, you love them, you care about them, you're trying to do what's best for you and for them. And then they're just keeping score. They're just keeping score. And you don't even know they're keeping score until you bring up that one thing. And then this avalanche of, oh, you this and you that, and you did this. And so I just wanted to bring that up when you talk about the diversion tactic. So many people, men and women, will understand what that is. And that's a person who you can't have an intimate relationship and be connected with, right? Because being connected with somebody, if I have a problem or if I have a concern and I bring that concern to you and you hear me and you have a space for me, right? There's a space for me in you that allows you to be able to say, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't see it that way. I need to factor in your perspective and what you're looking at, because this is somebody that you care and you love about. But that other person, they don't care and love you. They're using you. And that's why when you bring something up, it's telling them that what they feel like you're doing is you trying to control them, when really you was just trying to help them see something that they weren't seeing about themselves. And that's what we're supposed to be, right? We're supposed to be a cover for each other. There's going to be some things I don't see. There's going to be some things you don't see. And we're supposed to remind each other of those things. But in a relationship with a narcissist, you can't remind them of anything, because everything they're keeping score. And that's a tough relationship to be in. Go ahead.
So she mentioned minimization, and she mentioned like, oh, you're being petty, just focusing on such a small issue, or I think you might give examples. She usually give examples like somebody, a man, he does something inappropriate, something like, oh, that girl means nothing to me, or something like that. Stuff to make that problem. What you say, like make a mountain into a molehill or something like that.
Right. And that's something I know for sisters. When you talk about sisters, something they deal with when it comes to regards to brothers, right? Like, even myself in the past, I've been guilty of this, right? Some sister was showing interest in me, and I'm just like, it ain't nothing, because to me it wasn't nothing, but I didn't factor in how it made her feel. And so that needs to be addressed. Like, look, I'm married. Don't come at me like this, right? That's the type of attitude that we need to have about the sanctity of our relationship. That when my wife has a problem with my interaction with any woman, right, that makes her feel uncomfortable, I need to take that seriously. And the same vice versa, right? Whether it's her friend or some guy that she was talking to, like, I don't trust him, or whatever the case may be, there needs to be some consideration of the other person in the relationship that is taken seriously to a level, and talk to between those two with empathy and compassion and consideration and kindness as well. Versus minimizing, saying, oh, girl, you tripping. Them ladies always coming at me. I don't pay them no attention, right? That makes it, when I talk about gaslighting as being dehumanizing, it means that you didn't even take into consideration how that made her feel. Right. So sometimes men be at the restaurant and the waitress is kind of nice and flirty. Like, look, man, I'm here with my woman. Like, don't chill with that, like, and particularly if it makes her be uncomfortable. And so I think some of that is being able to empathize in the experience that we have with each other. So as to not minimize and trivialize, right? Like sometimes I post my personal stuff, my personal situation, my personal circumstances on social media, right? And you'll see people. There are some people who come with a very empathic human connection with me. I'm sorry, brother. I'm sorry you experienced that. And then there's some other people like, man, get over it, right? That's trivializing and minimizing. And those things hurt people. Those things hurt people. And you're hurting people unnecessarily, which makes you nasty. You're a nasty person for doing that. And that's what nasty people do, right? Even if it's somebody I'm not too favored with, right? I wouldn't make them feel less than human for having a human experience. And so for men, sometimes for men, we love our women, and other men to make you feel like, man, you being a simp, man, you don't need to love her. Like, nah, bro, I'm not a simp, man. I just love my wife, or I love my children, or I love my family. And that's okay. It's okay to do that, even if things aren't working out the way we would ideally want them to work out. That it's okay for you to have love and compassion for your mate or your spouse. Like, that's the fundamental basis of our relationships.
So I was just shared that on your page. I don't know if you were able to do this, so I just shared it on your page. And I see, somebody saying men love to say that women are overreacting. Maya, is it Maya? I think.
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to point out, it's interesting, right? Because you know this. You and I both are aware of this. I believe some more research needs to be done, and the definition needs to be expanded to cover more behaviors. But as the data is right now, it's believed that 90% of all narcissists are men, right? So this is a subject that women are going to be able to relate to at a higher level. I think, like I said, I think some definitions need to be realigned and readjusted, because I think there are more female narcissists than we give credit for. But I think a part of the narrative that exists is that men are supposed to absorb the mental health issues of women. And so as such, women may have more mental health illnesses, but because men just are supposed to deal with it, then it doesn't get categorized as mental health illness. But that is a serious situation where men say that women are overreacting. And you'll know this when you study narcissistic abuse. It's one of the favorite lines. You're overreacting, you tripping, it ain't that big of a deal. Like, that is the minimizing of the other person's experience. And so what we have to do, and a part of this, here's the crazy part, right? These are lessons that you are supposed to learn in your family structures, between how your mother and father relate to each other. Like, how well did your father listen to your mother, right? How well did your mother listen to the father? How much consideration did they give each other in the context of that relationship? And so the child is supposed to look up at the mother and father in a horizontal manner. No, in a vertical manner, right? Looking up to the parents and seeing how they're supposed to relate to each other. But if families are constantly falling apart, then we learn lessons that are different, that don't fulfill what our responsibilities are in our relationships and the way in which we relate to each other. And so you find men oftentimes minimizing and trivializing women's experience because they come from these cultures where they tend not to be practiced at empathizing with a woman's experience. And so that statement that she's making is absolutely true, that men, I've seen men do it. I hear men talk about it all the time. I hear men. Let me say this. In most of my conversations with men, there's a way in which we infantilize women. There's a way in which we infantilize women. In other words, we treat women like children, not like our partners, like they are not of equal value to us. And so, for example, as we're Muslims, right? So let's talk about, I don't want to have the conversation about polygyny, but I just bring it up, where there are men who believe they don't even have to consult with their wife before they get another wife, right? Like the level of disregard that you have to have for her humanity in order for that to be your mindset, right? Already tells me that you lean more towards the left side of narcissism, right? Versus leaning more to the right of empathy, right? In an empathetic relationship where you love your wife and you have to consider your wife, you have to consider how she feels about that, how that is going to impact her. And those are conversations that you should have at the beginning of the relationship so that it doesn't become an issue later. But nevertheless, my position in my marriage was always that I would never take on another wife unless I had the full approval and support of my current wife, right? Because I want our family dynamic to be successful all the way around. I'm not trying to create this situation where they're constantly at each other and I have to kind of play referee, right? And so the objective then, so what I'm saying is there are oftentimes, so I've seen masjids, right, where they have the mosque and the sister section is kind of like in the dungeon. Like, come on, bro. Like, I get it, right? There's some belief out there amongst Muslims that that women don't necessarily have to be at the mosque, and that's fine if you believe that, right? If you believe that, that's fine. But let's just say they are going to be at the mosque, then we need to make full accommodations, right? That respect their humanity, not put them in the dungeon. And so I'm saying you'll have more of this practices amongst men because narcissism is rewarded amongst men.
Okay, now, so you can't stop polygyny. Don't try to stop it. The conversation is going to come up. If you don't like it, it's going to come up. And I would just say, as a child of polygyny, that is important because when my father was doing it, it was like almost about 20 years. And it was all, he always told people he had two wives and one family. So it was important for his wives to have a decent enough relationship where the kids can be close, interact, where it's not just these kids here, these kids here. No, right. We always had full access to our siblings, where it wasn't just just half sibling, half. No, we always had full access to each other. We took trips together. We did all that together. So it was the kids' interest was definitely taken in consideration. So I see my imam Naeem is in the building. I have to shout him out. He said, "So yeah, if you love your wife and consider her feelings, many men will consider you a simp."
I mean, that's. I mean, haven't you heard that? Haven't that been your experience? Like you hear men talk about that. Like you let your wife run you, or I mean, as a man, like if I'm going to do something, I let my wife know I'm going to do something. I check in with her. I check in with her because she's my partner. She's not my child, right? I have a certain responsibility as a man, but she has certain responsibility as a woman, and they are co-rights, if you will. They come together to create this union that is respectful of her and her femininity and me and my masculinity, right? It don't make me less of a man, right? And I always have to assert, like, nothing about loving your wife like this is insane. And I get it, right? Because family structures have fallen apart. Family structures have fallen apart, and we exist in this overwhelming culture of hostility between men and women. And so if you a man and you love a woman, to most people who come from these dysfunctional families, loving a woman, just loving a woman. And I mean, I'm not talking about loving what she does for you. I mean, genuinely loving her, And people see you as, in this cultural context, people see that as weak. And I'm saying, I think for men who love their wives, men who are proud for loving their wives, I think they need to put their chest out a little bit more, right? To show and express that, say what you will, but there's nothing soft about me loving my woman except the love I give to my woman, right? And I say this all the time. Femininity rests in the context of masculinity. If we want feminine men, we have to create a strong context that makes women feel comfortable and secure, that allows them to be able to rest inside that masculinity. And our women should feel loved. Our women should feel loved by us. I grew up in the church somewhat, and my grandparents used to take me to church every Sunday. And so one of the things I learned in Sunday school, obviously I know a lot of Bible as a result. And so the Bible says that wives submit to your husband, right? That's an order from the creator. But it also said husbands love your wife, right? Husbands love your wife. So wives submit to your husband, husband loves your wife. And that means you got to check in with her. Babe, how you doing? You good? We good? Right? That's what a loving man does. It don't make you soft, right? When you learn about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Muhammad was a very kind and generous and compassionate man. These are all feminine virtues. But Muhammad also put on the shield and yielded a sword too, right? He did both of those. And that's us as men, right? We have a hard exterior and a soft internal. And that soft internal allows us to connect with our women in a way that allows them to flourish and develop appropriately. And we need that from each other. And I'm sorry that's the case. I'm really sorry that's the case, that men see loving your woman in its truest sense as being simpish. And that just gives you an indication of the family structure that they come from, because people who come from loving family structures never see it that way.
Okay. Kamika, I don't know where she's going with here. Not with the school with Kamika, back in my hometown. She said being loved and respected is two different things. So I don't know what she's implying or what the context is around it. But if you have some thoughts.
So let's talk about a little bit about the mental health, like what the impact of this is. We'll talk about it in general, right? But the subject matter here is about how this is impacting Black men. So I talked about, I was trying to find that quote. I couldn't find it. But I talked about Dr. Eric Byrne talking about relationships of games and relationships of intimacy, right? And so everything I'm talking to you about now has been about intimacy. How do we connect? How do we communicate? How do we show empathy? How do we show love and caring for each other? And that's what we're supposed to be doing if we have an intimate relationship. So in an intimate relationship, I know maybe the sisters won't understand, but just roll with me for a second. So when you see, oh, you from Cleveland? I mean, not Cleveland. You're from Ohio, right? And so when LeBron and Kyrie were there, right? They had a symbiotic relationship on the court where, yeah, you have these players and everything's drawn up, but they work together so well, like it's so symbiotic, right? And that's what the relationship between a husband and his wife is supposed to be like, right? So if I'm the husband, I'm coming down the court with the ball and I throw my wife to alley-oop, I don't have to communicate to her that that's what's going to happen, right? We just have this relationship where we are interconnected at a very deep level. And oftentimes, right, and this has been my experience, I've been Muslim 20 years and I've experienced this for 20 years. When I hear Muslims talking about relationships, they always talking about rights and responsibilities. And I'm just telling you, that's an indication to me that a game is being played. Because when a game is being played, it's always about the rules. It's not about the symbiosis. How are we working together, right? When you're in an interconnected relationships, when you are connected to that person, when your heart is connected to theirs, when you see their humanity. When I come home from work and I see my wife working and sweating on the kitchen, I tell her, where you need my help at, babe? Or maybe I'm outside shoveling some snow or cutting some grass, and she come outside and like, hey, where can I help, right? Of course, we have these gender roles, right, that reflect the optimal level of the relationship. But when you have those roles, because you know about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? He used to sew his own clothes. He used to, do his own cleaning and cooking. Like those are things that he did to take the pressure off of some of the stuff that they were doing, and they offered him that as well, right? And so when we're talking about our relationships, we're talking about intimacy. All that other stuff is games. And you have to know when you're dealing with somebody who has been neglected in their childhood. Because when you're neglected in your childhood, everything is about how do I get my needs met? And that's front and center in everything. And so as Muslims, we're supposed to be away from that. Remember, like Muslims have this very high understanding of charity, right? Sadaqah, and sadaqah begins where? Where does sadaqah begins, right? The first sadaqah is between a husband and wife, right? Before you start giving to everybody else, are you good? Are you good? Because I have to come home to you. Like for me, it's always lost on me, like how you treat your wife like that and then feel comfortable, like in your most vulnerable state of being, you're gonna lay down next to her and sleep. Like you're gonna be rude and you're gonna be abusive to your wife and then go to sleep like that. The idea is that is insane, but a part of that is because I grew up watching The Burning Bed, and yeah, nobody wants to find themselves in that situation. And so you always hear me say, always choose love, always choose love. But in order to do that, you have to have love inside of you. And because most of us have come from these family structures that don't facilitate love, most of us don't have love inside of us. And so what we're facilitating is selfishness. And a part of the problem with that is because, so we're Muslims, what Islam is asking us to do is to connect with each other, human to human. But when it's absent and devoid of love, then we're not connecting together human to human. We're connecting together master to slave, so that you need to meet my needs. I need my needs met. And I don't care what the situation is. I don't care what the circumstances is. You just need to meet my needs, right? And it's a really, you can see the narcissism in it, because it's almost like a greed, if you will, that they just take, and feel put upon when you ask them to give. And so what that does for these type of men is it creates this cognitive dissonance. It creates a cognitive dissonance, meaning I'm married, I have this wife, I want to look like I love her, but all I do is take from her. I don't have anything to give her. And when I say give, I'm not talking about like providing physical things. I'm saying providing a safe relationship, And the cognitive dissonance happens when you have competing ideas, right? You want it to look like you love this woman, but you're not treating her like you love her. And so those ideas are hitting up against each other, and it creates in your children, right, a level of disdain for the nature of the relationship that you are presenting to them. Or it creates a son who will treat women the way he sees you treating his mom. But also, and so what happens is, or you can create a boy who grows up and desperately wants to be loved because he didn't get that love or see that love in his family structure. And then he finds himself in relationships with women who recognize his love hunger and will abuse him and manipulate him in order to. So now she's the narcissist, and she's using him as a result of his emptiness, right? And because of the narrative out there that men are to absorb abuse from women, right? So when women abuse men, we just absorb it, right? But really, we don't absorb it. It eats at us. It eats at us in a way that that lowers our capacity to perform at the highest level of men. And so sometimes you have a lot of men, like I know Muslim men in abusive relationships, and nobody in the community would acknowledge that it's an abusive relationship. And really, if you really want to define it properly, as a Muslim, any relationship that is devoid of love, we should consider that abusive. Because I don't know what purpose it serves if it's devoid of love. And I'm not talking about love, that feeling. I'm talking about a genuine concern about the well-being of another human being, particularly the one that you made this supposedly lifetime commitment to. Any questions out there?
No, you just had Maya. She just followed up, said that was an indication that one is only looking out for themselves. And then she just used the quote, take it like a man, to what you just said, about.
Right. That type of rhetoric is, here's the thing. And this is important for us to understand abuse, right? Because we're not just trying to have families that are healthy. We're trying to have healthy communities, because the healthier the community, the greater the potential for me as an individual. So when you talk about a degree of selfishness and self-love and self-care, is that I want to be able to be around people that I can be free enough in myself to blossom as my being, as me, as an individual being. And so I need not just my wife, right? I need the community to acknowledge that me and my wife have a bond, and the community supports that bond. And so that what you have then is so I always often tell people this definition that I found for love, that I found to be very practical, right? That love is an involuntary response to virtue if you are virtuous, right? So the more trustworthy you are, right? When we talk about our love for Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when you talk about our love for him, like, he is the model of virtue. So our love for him is without boundaries, right? The love of his companions for him, when you see the nature of their relationship to him, was without boundaries, right? So that when he told people that he had took a journey to Jerusalem, right, and somebody brought it to Abu Bakr and was like, man, did you hear that, man? Muhammad said he went to Jerusalem, right? And Abu Bakr's position was, if Muhammad said it, that's what happened. That's what happened. Why? Because there was a level of trust where he know Muhammad is not the kind of man to play games like that. So if he said it, that's what it was. And that's the kind of relationship that we need to have between husband and wife, between a neighbor. So Muhammad always told us about our responsibility to our neighbors, right? What's happening is, Dave Chappelle did a joke the other day, and he talked about like watching the Care Bears, right? Where you just burst love from inside of you out. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. And unfortunately, if you're not in a safe environment, people will rip you to shreds to trying to do that. And that's why you should be very comfortable. You should be very concerned when you're around men that take issue with you loving your wife. You should be very careful with that, because those men are dangerous. They're dangerous. I'm sorry, let me take a drink here.
Okay. So just finishing up this list that she had. So she went to minimization, and she mentioned something that was very striking. That when she talked about the gaslighting and the narcissists, that they have one set of rules for themselves, and one set of rules for you and others. It's like, whoa, I think that deserves some.
So this is very important, especially when you talk about in a religious context, right? And you'll see this among spiritual narcissists, right? Among spiritual narcissists, you'll have these leaders that espouse what the regulations are for you as a Muslim, for the community as a Muslim. But then you'll see them engaged in behavior that is counter to what they are telling you, right? Now, one of the things that's beautiful about Islam is that even if you the imam, you as the imam are not beyond reproach, right? So, for example, if the way Islam is structured, if the imam, if the imam is not there, somebody else steps in to make the prayer, right? And any of us men should be able to step in and lead the salat. And what that symbolizes is that our community is not built around, I say idol worship, I'm not talking about like physical idols. I mean, worshiping the personality of a particular imam, right? So the imam may have a skill set that is atop of the social hierarchy in our community, but he's not the only leader in the community. He's just the highest leader in the community. And so what that means is oftentimes our imams can be challenged by community members about his grandiosity. And so, but what we have to be careful then is that you have some people who are what they call covert narcissists. Now, that's where, because prior to my situation, I knew what a narcissist was, right? So when you said narcissist, I understood Kanye West is a narcissist, right? Nicki Minaj is a narcissist. Donald Trump, oh my God, is a narcissist. Like, Donald Trump is so much of a narcissist. It's actually interesting to watch him perform his narcissism, like on the grandest stage in the world. And he does a phenomenal job at giving you a textbook idea of what it means to be a narcissist. But then you have a covert narcissist, right? And a covert narcissist is exactly that. And that it makes them very dangerous, right? That's what they call vulnerable narcissists. They usually use victimhood as a way to control and manipulate the community. And so you'll often find that there are more covert narcissists amongst women than there are men, because men are actually rewarded for grandiosity, right? For being the big man on the block, for having the biggest monies, for having the biggest cars and the biggest house, right? Socially, that is okay for men to do. And so oftentimes I try to tell women, be careful of what you're looking for in a man, because you have these list of things that increase the chances of you ending up with a narcissist. It intensifies those chances, because you're looking for the things that narcissistic men are much likely to have. But for women, the covert narcissist, or what they call the shy narcissist, right? So socially, it's more acceptable for women to be shy, or to be to not be grandiose, right? And so then what you find amongst female narcissists, particularly as pertains to covert narcissists, is more of the damsel in distress. The damsel in distress. She always needs help. She always needs somebody's support. I think like she dropped her handkerchief, and then just a bunch of men come and pick up the handkerchief. Like, here you go, madam. Right? It's presented as feminine and soft, but there's a level of hostility right beneath the surface, right? So that you'll see women who, when they talk about, particularly as it pertains to women, when they talk about what their rights are, that's my right, right? It's like the attitude you see, like what she is entitled to. So like, even if you're entitled to something, you want to have a humble spirit about it, right? That there are certain things that I'm entitled to from my wife, but I don't want to go to my wife saying like, I'm entitled to intercourse, this many times, or whatever the case may be. Like, who wants that? Who wants that? Right? Like, of course you're entitled to intercourse. That's the whole point of marriage, is we're going to be committed to intercourse with each other and each other only. But the question is, what is the attitude about it, right? So the grandiose man has this like, come pleasure me, right? Like, that's his mentality, instead of connecting with his wife, communicating with his wife. Like, there are ways that you can communicate with your wife that makes her want you, right? And that's how you request intimacy, right? You don't even have to request intimacy, just making sure that the space exists for intimacy to thrive. And then the same for sisters, right? Like, if you want your man to meet your needs, you got to cut the attitude down. But that attitude tells you that they feel a level of entitlement, right? And though these are the rules and the regulations regarding our religion, right, there's still a human place where we connect. So I often ask sisters, like, do you think Khadijah requested her rights from Muhammad the way you requesting your rights from your husband? Right? And Muhammad's love for Khadijah is very clear, even years after she passed, right? And so that's what we're looking for in our relationships. And that's why I say that anything absent of love is abuse. Anything absent of love is abuse. So we both should be working on ourselves, right, to make sure that we have the right amount of empathy within ourselves to be able to connect with our spouses, connect with our children, connect with our community. I mean, we talked about this even with the children, right? There's a way in which, we're like tyrants all the time with our children, like mothers and fathers, like tyrants, right? Listen, your children will do whatever you ask them to do if you are appropriately connected to them. So whenever they're not doing what you think they should be doing, check the connection with them. The connection may be off. And that's the same with your spouse, and that's the same with your religious community, the people you with. Like, we need to be focused on having better connections with each other.
Yeah. You mentioned with no love, and that's abuse. So, real life situations nowadays in our communities, you have some people that have the entitlement where they don't have any like what I'm looking for. One person has duties and the other person doesn't. Now, with the gaslight, somebody might be worried about even bringing that up. You mean because they can be minimized real quick, like, oh, that's no big deal. You mean just work through it, such and such. What
Yeah.
you call that abuse? But
Go
somebody,
ahead.
one person has rights, the other person doesn't. You mean one person has duties, the other person doesn't. You mean
I, like you have to evaluate, like what you're looking for is the character of a person, right? If I'm doing everything, if I'm doing everything and you watching me do everything, right? You don't offer assistance, you don't offer help, right? That is a relationship devoid of love. It's devoid of love, right? So a sister should be able to say, hey, babe, I'm going to run to the mall and get my eyebrows done. I'm going to leave the kids here with you. That's it. I don't even know why that should be a problem, right? But there are some women who don't even feel comfortable to ask their husband, can they have some alone time or some private time because he's going to make a big deal out of it. That dude don't love you. And I'm sorry. Like, I hate that you have children with that dude or vice versa, right? That, um, you a husband, you come home from work, you mow the lawn, you take care of the structure of your family. I say the structure, I mean like whatever the maintenance needs to be done around the house, you making sure that all those things are taken care of, and then you just want to rest. And she come in like, the kids didn't stay with you. I'm about to go to the mall. Like,
mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll keep the kids anytime. I don't have a problem with that. But I just got off work. I just cut the grass. Like, I'm saying, there's a way in which we are interacting with each other with a level, like we're married, but right beneath the surface of our marriage is a level of contempt that we have for the humanity of the other person that we're with. And it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. That's why I always say choose love, choose love. So what people do is they have uh, all these all these excuses for why they can't be the best mate that they need to be for you. And all of those excuses are gaslighting. All of them are gaslighting. They're gaslighting you. Everything that needs to be done in our relationship, we both have the capacity to do. The only reason I would tell my wife no on anything is because it just can't be done. If it just can't be done, then I have to tell her like, babe, I want to do it, but I don't have the skill, or I don't have the knowledge, right? And if it's something that I should have the skill or knowledge on, maybe I can't do it today, but just give me time. I'll figure out how to do it, right? Because we are the highest servant to each other. We are the highest servant to each other. Remember, I said that Islam places a very high value on sadaqah, on charity. And charity starts at home first. So our relationship to each other should be charitable. Remember, I said love is an involuntary response to virtue. If you are virtuous, charity is a virtue. And so the more charitable a husband is to his wife, the more charitable a wife is to her husband, the deeper the love they have the capacity to envelop in between them. Right? And that's what you want your children to see. What you want your children to see is, my mom and dad love each other, and that's what I want when I get married. But that ain't what our children looking at. And you know that's not what they're looking at because of our divorce rate. Our divorce rates tell you ain't no love in our relationships because people don't divorce people they love. And the reason people divorce is because either the parties in the relationship don't know how to love each other, or they don't have the capacity to love. And believe it or not, like Allah says in the Quran, like there are some people with hard hearts, right? And no matter what you do, that you ain't cracking nothing in that heart, right? Nothing's bursting forth from it. The more responsibility, the more you try to teach them, the more you try to give, it ain't gonna work. It just make them hard and hard and hard. And some of us in the Bible, Jesus came along, according to the Bible, peace be present, peace be upon him. Jesus came along in the Bible and said, no more divorce. And they was like, but Moses gave us the right to offer divorce. And Jesus said in the Bible, Moses did that because he knew you had a hard heart. And so what I'm saying is, we Muslims, we're divorcing at an inordinate rate, right? Like marry, divorce, marry, divorce, marry, divorce. What that tells you is that the parties involved in this process of marrying and divorce, either they don't know how to love, or they don't have the capacity to love. Meaning there are some people, they don't, it's not in them. It's not in them. They're not loving beings. Most of these people you would call narcissists, right? Narcissists do not have the capacity to love. So anytime you're in a relationship with a narcissist, it's always going to be a transactional relationship, and they are going to do everything they can to make sure that they get most of the transactions. And that's what's hard about being with a narcissist, right? You love this person, you give, and it's never enough because they have a hole in their heart that's like a black hole. I call it a love hole. It just, love goes in, nothing comes out. Love goes in, nothing comes out. And we all should be looking for and trying to develop and trying to nurture and trying to manufacture love. That should be our fundamental basis of our relationships. And then, the rights and responsibilities act as a guideline, right? Our Islam acts as a guideline. But if you don't love Allah, let's make it simple, right? If you don't love Allah, right, enough to want to offer to Allah the best life that you have, what you got to offer somebody else? What you got? And that's what you find, right? That's why like you go to some of these masjids and it's just full of, I hate to say this, man, it's just full of old people, right? And masjids are supposed to have a diverse age range, right? You're supposed to have a group of elders, you're supposed to have a group of adults, a group of young adults, a group of teenagers, and a group of children. All of these people are supposed to be in the masjid, but that requires a family structure, and the family structure, the mortar for the family structure is love. And that's not what we're doing. We're not doing love. And that's why most of our lectures are about rights and responsibilities. Imams have to cater to rights and responsibilities because you have two people who, although they're married, there's a level of contempt right beneath the surface of their marriage. And so there's always this contention. And when there's contention instead of love, people are always trying to find out what their rights is, what you owe me, what you're supposed to be doing. When the reality is, I'll do anything for my wife, man. Anything. I don't care what it is. As long as it's within the context of virtue. As long as it's in the context of pleasing Allah, right? Like, so when I say anything, I ain't talking about like, me and my wife gonna go off and smoke some crack. I ain't talking about that. When I say anything, I mean, if I got it, it's hers. It's hers. I'll do anything. If she say, there's a sister on your page, I don't really like how she come at you, she's blocked, right? Because we don't need to have that conversation. My wife is first and foremost. There's Allah, then my wife. Because that's where I'm going to get the most of my sadaqah from. Everything I do for my wife, pleasing my wife. Now, just imagine you in a relationship, man. Not where you're talking about rights and responsibility. You're in a relationship with somebody who every day they wake up, they making sure they do something that's pleasing to you because they know that's going to be a reward to them from Allah. And that's what both of y'all are doing. And that's true love. You love Allah, then you love your wife, you love your kids, and it trickles down in that hierarchy. But that's not what we're doing, man. We're doing co-parenting. We're doing child support. Like, none of this communicates love, man. None of it. None of it communicates love. Yana said in one show I was watching where I know I can get long-winded, so if you need to just jump in and cut me off, I won't.
Somebody has a question for you. Maya again, she said, isn't it possible just to fall out of love with your spouse?
That's what people believe. People believe that it's possible to fall out of love. But falling out of love, what that communicates to you is that, remember I said love is an involuntary response to virtue if you are virtuous. Something else is happening. What you fell out of is infatuation. That's what you fell out of. Because infatuation you come out of, right? It's transient. It moves. It shakes. Love doesn't shake, right? In the Bible, it said love is patient, love is kind, love is love. And then at the bottom, it said love never fails. Love never fails. So what your experience is that there is a biochemical, there's a biochemical process in the body of hormones that you experience when you're having that infatuation process. So when people say they fall in love, that's what I mean. They fall out of infatuation. You never fall out of love because your love is based in virtue. You have a man or a woman that's always honest with you. You have a man or a woman that's always compassionate and kind with you. You have a man or a woman that's always, you can just go down a list of virtues, right? They're honorable, they have dignity, they're industrious, they're ambitious, they're motivated. How can you fall out of love with somebody like that? Like if you fall out of love with somebody who expresses those virtues to the optimal of their capacity, then something is wrong with you. That's not the person. It's not the person that you love. Something is wrong with you internally that has caused you to miss what is the fundamentals of love, right? Remember, love is an involuntary response to virtue. So that when you see your husband standing with dignity, when you see your husband standing with honesty, when you see your wife, standing with kindness, like how can you watch, let's say your wife is nurturing a baby. You watch your wife nurture a baby and you fall out of love with that. Like what's wrong? What's wrong with you? Like what could possibly be wrong with you to watch a woman nurturing your child and you fall out of love with that? There's a connection that you missed in your responsibility of your own humanity that you have neglected. So you neglected to nurture your own virtues within yourself. And as such, you can't see the connection between you and that other person. And that's why I say love is secondary. Trust is first. Integrity is first. Honor is first. Dignity is first, right? If you lazy, if your husband lazy, it's hard to connect with a person who's lazy because they'll watch you do everything. That will make you fall out of what you thought was love because that person didn't just get lazy, right? And so that's why you have to keep virtue at the forefront of your mind because the reality is virtuous people are rare. And to fall out of love with a virtuous person, given the rarity of their existence, is an indication that you may not be as mature as you believe yourself to be. I hope that made sense.
Okay. Now, just to remind people again, this studio that I'm in now, it's very important, especially for those who are Muslim, those who are connected to the spiritual aspect, to the spiritual path. That this studio I'm in right now may very well be the result of duas from one of the most famous sheikhs in the Muslim world. You mean from one of the most famous sheikhs in the Muslim world, from two of the most famous sheikhs in the Muslim world, who, like I said, whenever they would come into the Car Synagogue, the Sisi family would stay with my brother-in-law and his family. You mean, and when you host somebody as a guest, you mean when a guest hosts you, you give them something. You mean you're there with them, you're making dua for them while you're there, and you don't know how much those duas can impact and bring benefit. You mean, especially when you have a certain state with the law. You mean that you have from serving the people. You mean, so you mean, and that's Islam is about serving the people. So we hope that that's what this is all about, serving people in the best way, trying to be humble. You mean. Now, Dr. Ramanish, you finished up with the last two, but they're still important. They're very important types of gaslighting, by proxy and by tribe. He says by proxy, someone else does the gaslighting for the narcissist. He says like one parent making excuses for the other parent, one coworker making excuses for the supervisor. He's good for the company. Money's rolling in, stuff is good. Or like a friend giving another friend, the friend of the narcissist, you mean, telling somebody else, they're not too bad, you mean, they're okay, you mean, they have some issues, but they're okay, you mean. So you want to speak on those two?
Okay, so when you talk about gaslighting by proxy, right, or more, I don't know what's happening. Sorry about that. You got some feedback there. I was trying to look at some of the comments as you were talking. So when you talk about by proxy, what you have to know is what proxy means, right? So proxy means by advocacy, meaning I may be the narcissist. And oftentimes what you see, particularly in family structures, is the husband is a narcissist, the mother is the empath, and as such, the father is using the mother to impose his narcissism upon the children, so that he's not directly being narcissistic to the child. He's using somebody else, a third party, is what they call triangulation, right? And in some cases, what they call flying monkeys. If you ever seen the movie The Wiz, I love that song. Don't nobody bring me no bad news, right? She had an entire crew of people that were designed to prevent reality from coming into her space. So she's the queen, she's the witch, she's the wicked witch, and everything anybody tell her about her better be positive, right? And so you have other people then who operate on behalf of the narcissist. They may not be narcissists, but they won't confront the narcissist because narcissists can be dangerous and they can be difficult to deal with. And so as such, then you'll have people who do what they call gaslighting by proxy, right? So if I express an experience that I had, you may not come directly to me and challenge that experience, but you'll be feeding other people information that is biased in your favor that makes them come and challenge me. And they'll challenge me no matter what because they're loyal and committed to you. And so what you see happening then is that I'm giving the facts of my experience based on my experience, like it's my experience. And then somebody else, not you, will come in and tell me that's not what happened. That's not experience. You men, y'all always do this, or y'all always like that. I know it was something you did. It was something you had to do, right? No woman would do that unless a man did something like that to her, right? Like, so what they are doing is they are defending the narcissist narrative. They are defending the narcissist narrative. Just and one of my personal experiences when I was in one of my therapy sessions with my therapist, and so my therapist had understood everything that was happening with me in my personal situation. I mean, obviously that's my therapist. I tell my therapist everything. Just on that note, just side note, if you're gonna go to therapy, don't hold back. The whole point of the therapy is to help you organize and structure your reality so that it's in alignment with reality. So when you're holding back from the therapist about what your experience is, then they don't have everything they need to help you align that. So I'll just throw that out there for those of you who may be going to therapists. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. Yeah. So anyway, I was telling my therapist that my therapist was telling me that essentially that I was being gaslighted and that it was going to work because there is a narrative about Black men that even though, now understand this, my therapist knows me. None of the stereotypes apply to me. None of the stereotypes apply to me. But in order for the narcissist to dominate, they use whatever they can in the environment to manipulate you. And that's when you have people coming in to defend the narcissist, what they call flying monkeys, right? And so that's the experience that you have when you talk about narcissist or gaslighting by proxy. It means the narcissist is using other people to gaslight you. That's what they're doing. And so when you talk about spiritual gaslighting, you can have entire communities of Muslims that are, I read a book some years ago by Stephen Covey called The Speed of Trust. And he talked about narcissistic organizations. And so narcissistic organizations have one goal, and that's to protect the identity of the organization at whatever the cost. And so if you bring something to the organization or the community or the leadership that does not shine well upon the leadership, they are going to fight back. They're going to fight back. And so you'll start to see like your reputation being besmirched, people challenging you, people using the religion to say you can't do that, right? So like you speak out against somebody who did something to you, and they'll tell you you're gossiping or backbiting, but the person did something to you. And what Muslims are supposed to do, there's a process that we have to resolve conflict. So why are you being railroaded in a different direction than addressing the conflict head on? Well, because they understand that there's something that they need from that other person that you can't give them, that is going to cause them to categorize you as the problem versus that person being a problem. And you can have the whole community going against you. I've seen There was a masjid in Houston recently where the imam exposed somebody who molested somebody's child, and the whole community got together to get that imam out of that masjid. And I'm saying, here's one of the things interesting that I've never experienced. And inshallah, there are some imams out there who are watching this or will see this. And I want you to I want you to explain to me, right? Allah says in the Quran, He told Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, don't offer salat in that masjid. And I've never heard a khutbah about what that masjid is. Right. And I'm not saying like point out any particular masjids. I mean, what are the characteristics of that masjid that Allah told Muhammad, right? He's the messenger of Allah, not to go in that masjid, not to offer salat in that masjid, right? Because Muhammad was on his way to offer salat in the masjid. And then the revelation came and said, don't offer salat in that masjid. And I'm saying, I would venture to say, if you have a situation where you have, and it says in the Quran, a masjid, that its foundation was infidelity, right? And infidelity is defined as, at the root of it, it's not about the love of Allah. At the root of it, right? There are some masjids that are built for the hustle. They're built for the hustle. Just like you have churches that are built for the hustle. We know these churches out there hustling these people out of their money. I'm saying you don't have masjids like that, but there's some social status that these particular masjids have that are not orientated towards the love of Allah. And for me, and I'm always open to correction. For me, one of the things I look at is the family structure of the masjid. Right? I'm looking at the family structures of the masjid. If you have what I described earlier, people in and out, divorces, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 marriages, everybody, right? For me, it tells me that the root of this community can't be fidelity, because no one is faithful to anyone. Everybody is abandoning each other. Everybody is deserting each other. And there can't be a situation, right? Even if you have divorce in the Muslim community, it should be done amicably, where everybody could stay in the same community, right? Just the relationship has dissolved, not the community ties have dissolved. But that's not what you have, man. There's a bunch of hostility. There's a bunch of contention. There's a bunch of dirty behavior that's occurring under the veil, right? Like publicly, the masjid in the general public, the masjid, oh, that's masjid such and such, it's a great masjid. But when you scratch the surface, you see it's a bunch of dirty stuff going around that don't reflect what that masjid should be responsible for reflecting.
Okay, so my Imam Naeem out of Masjid Mukmin in Pittsburgh. I gotta make a trip there.
Okay.
So he said that Masjid is referenced in Surah At-Tawbah, which is 9th Surah, and it was Masjid al-Darara, built by the hypocrites with the intention to undermine the Muslim community from within, to cause division between the Muslims. So appreciate that, ma'am, for that reference.
Right, and that's something I just personally, if we want thriving communities, we have to address that. We have to address that, because you're going to have those communities that say they're Muslim, they say that they're fi sabilillah, they're in the cause of Allah, but that's not what it looked like happening. That's not what it looks like happening. And I'm not saying that our goal as Muslims, because what you'll end up having is different masjids going around pointing the finger at each other saying that's the masjid. I'm talking about more conversations about the characteristics of some of these Muslim communities that are not facilitating love. They are not facilitating love. And you'll know it, man. When you talk to these people, like, you can feel it in your soul. Like, their intention is not good. Their intention is not good. You can feel, it's like when you go to a car salesman. You know that feeling you get when you go to a car salesman? Like, everything he's saying, it sounds good, but something don't feel right about this deal that you offering me. And I'm saying you have those kind of Muslims that, it's been my experience where, I studied Islam. I read 3 of the biographies before I converted. I read the Quran. I studied the Bible, because I was trying to see, like, what is the structure across time, right? And so I see that the structure across time is to create a context where we could openly love. And some of these communities you're going to be in, they see love as food to eat. And so they'll just eat all your love up. They'll take all your resources. They'll take all your energy. They'll take all your time and give you nothing in return. And that creates those type of it creates those type of people that he spoke of, like essentially, like what's more dissenting than divorce? What's more dissenting than divorce? What's more division than divorce? Nothing creates more division than divorce. And so our objective should be to move in a loving way, in a loving manner, facilitating a loving context. And some of these masters are not doing that.
Okay, so Imam Naeem said, when I lived in Philly, there were mosques that I refused to enter because of what you are saying right now. I considered them to fit the description mentioned in those ayat.
Right, right. And man, and that's what I suspected it was. Again, I don't think it's. Here's the thing about. So when I talk about what I've learned about narcissism, remember I told you I studied the works of Stephen Covey. He talked about narcissistic organizations, right? And your masjid is an organization. Your masjid is an organization. So when you have, like, I've been in masjids where there was nepotism and cronyism, right? And all these other isms, right? Where if I had a problem with a brother, but he's been a long-standing member of the community, then my issue was not going to get addressed, right? And I recall there's a hadith where Umar, a sister had brought a claim against Umar and they had to go to court. And so Umar saw the sister come into the court prior to him. And the judge gave her the greeting, Salam alaikum, sister. And then when Umar came in behind her, and the judge was like, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, Emir Mu'minun, right? So the sister just got Assalamu alaikum, and then Umar got this like glorious greeting. And Umar told the judge, you have already been unjust. You have already been unjust. Before we even started the case, you've already been unjust. You gave her Assalamu alaikum, you give me Assalamu alaikum. Otherwise, you give her the same greetings. And so what I'm saying is there's a way in which there was a degree of integrity that those Muslims were trying to protect, right? And so you go into some of these other communities, they're not trying to protect integrity, man. And I know these communities because these people, when I've been in those spaces, they ain't like me because that kind of stuff, I wasn't going for it. And if you're going to kick me out or if you're going to make me uncomfortable here, that's cool. But just understand that what I stand on, right, is that my life is in the cause of Allah, and I'm going to uphold that whatever my context is. And so I would like to hear more khutbahs about that behavior. And maybe some of these places can't give that khutbah because they are that masjid, right? And they don't want to tell nobody they that masjid. But that's a part of, and man, whew, Philly. I'll just leave it at that. Like I know Philly has a reputation for those type of situations and circumstances there. But as we develop stronger families, as we eliminate this pharaonic, right? When you talk about narcissism is pharaonic. It's from Pharaoh. Pharaoh is the archetypical narcissist of the Quran, right? When you look at his attributes, he thought he was God. Everything revolved around him, right? So you can have whole communities full of pharaohs under the veil of Islam. Under the veil of Islam. They're not concerned about anybody else. They're only concerned about their image. They'll do it if it bolsters their image, they'll do it. Right? If it's a situation where it's not going to make them look good, they ain't doing it, even if it's the right thing to do. And all the time I tell people, Allah said in the Quran, stand for justice even against your own interests. Even if it's against your interest, man, you got to stand for the right thing. And that's not what we have people doing. And where you have absent justice, you have absent love. Remember, love is an involuntary response to justice. The more virtue we have, the more of the model of Muhammad that exists in our culture and how we relate to each other, the more sincere and genuine love that we can have for each other. And that's what we're supposed to be looking for and establishing. But that's not what's happening, man. You got, like I said, you got Muslims arguing over child support. They don't even make sense to me. Like, if you arguing over child support, your context is so devoid of love, it don't even matter whether that child get child support or not. It don't even matter because it's so devoid of love that it assures that that child is going to experience abuse. And what's the difference whether you pay for abuse or not, right? The objective should be love at every level of analysis for us as Muslims, whether we are supporting each other or fighting each other. Even if we have to fight each other, the fight should be based on somebody standing in love, somebody standing in the context of love, that I'm trying to make sure that as many people that can be okay are okay. So I appreciate the Imam offering that assistance. But I would like to see more of that so that we can make sure that we're not facilitators of narcissistic organizations, because in my opinion, that was the thing about that masjid, right? When you talk about the hypocrite, it's the person that, you know, like you said earlier, all the rules apply to you, but none of the rules apply to me. I can do what I want, but you have to follow all the rules. And then I use those rules to control and manipulate you, because obviously they don't apply to me. And yeah, that's that masjid. That masjid was a narcissistic organization. And I think Muslims should do a lot more research on narcissism. One of the things Dr. Rahmani said is that it's the mental health epidemic of our times. And I don't see us addressing it. And if we don't address it, if we don't understand it thoroughly, if we don't thoroughly understand it, you can be in support of narcissistic abuse and not even know that that's what you're doing, because the person who's using you, right, the narcissism by proxy, the person who's using you is the narcissist, and they've framed everything. So if we can't identify the behavior as it exists in our communities, then we're going to have problems, right? Because our families have broken down, and when families break down, the prevalence of those mental health issues become more common. And we should see it in our men and against our men, right? And what I mean is, we should see it when sisters are using narcissism by proxy against men. You have to know, is that sister coming to you as a damsel in distress, right? Because she knows the Muslim brothers are going to back her, right? She knows that. But is she using that to abuse that brother, right? Do we know who that brother is? Do we know that brother to be this type of brother? Have we talked to the brother, right? Have we talked to both of them together? Because sometimes you get these two people together and have a conversation with them, and you can see where the problem is if you're paying attention. Now, I'm not saying that it's our imam's responsibility to go out there and become a licensed and clinical therapist, but we should have some knowledge, a wherewithal to be able to see these things as they unfold in our community, because gaslighting is serious, and you have to remember, it is insidious. It is insidious. It is designed for you not to be able to see it. And these people, that's one of the things. So when you talk about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam not going to pray in that masjid, is what Allah knows is Muhammad's heart, and then what the hypocrites will do to your heart, unbeknownst to you. So I'm saying, if Muhammad can't go in that masjid, who do you think you are to be able to go in that masjid, right? If it's toxic, you will be toxic, even if it's by proxy. And so those are some of the things that we need to be able to recognize. The literature is available, and it's not like it's going to change how we view ourselves as Muslims. It will be in full support of how we understand the Quran and what is being revealed to us through the Quran and the life example of the Prophet himself.
Okay. So here's a picture real quick I was going to show. This is I don't know if you can see it like that. My brother-in-law, his father, and Sheikh Ibrahim Niyas in 1968. So.
Oh, okay.
Today's studio.
I've seen that picture around the internet quite a bit.
Today's studio may be the result of one of his duas, maybe an answer. This very house I'm in right now may be the result of one of those duas. I know you run out of time. If you have a few minutes, maybe we could talk about how blacks, and specifically since we're talking about black men, have been gaslighted throughout our history here. You mean through slavery and all the systems?
I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very important topic, right? Because it's going to be hierarchies trickle down. And so when you talk about the gaslighting of black men, I can give you several examples. So a couple years ago, I posted a photo of a protest in 1963, I believe it was, down at the St. Louis Arch. So if you're American, you know the history of the Arch, right? You know the Arch is down on the riverfront. It's one of America's great monuments that was financed through the New Deal. So it was federal money given to St. Louis that was financed through the New Deal. And in the area where it's built now, it was like 40 blocks, a neighborhood of about 40 blocks where black people predominantly live because they work downtown, so they live downtown. So their house, much like Central Park, right? There used to be a community of successful blacks thriving where Central Park is, and then through eminent domain, they pushed them all out, flattened the land, and then built Central Park. So you see things like this happen over and over again in America. So there's a picture I posted of the signs of black people who used to live in that area having signs that said, we want employment, we want contracts, right? Because this was federal money that was given to the city of St. Louis to build that monument that black people were locked out of as a result of racist employment practices. And so now that they spent millions of dollars to build that facility, of which black people got not a penny of that money. So when you look at pictures of the arch being built, you see all white men. It's all white men. In a city that was predominantly black, all white men are building the arch. And so you have decades of that happening. And then now, since we've passed these laws of Equal Employment Act, Equal Housing Act, right? We have all these acts passed. But the time to make money off of those efforts and events was in the 60s, right? So now we're in 2000 talking about, why don't black men get jobs? Why don't black men do this? Why don't black men do that? Right? With no mention. Remember, I told you, if ever you want to know if a game is being played, you have to consider the discount. What is being left off the table? If we are having a conversation between two sincere human beings, both of us should be able to put all of the ideas on the table and then organize those ideas in a way that we get the best outcome from everybody. But that's not what's happening. Information is being left off the table. So when people talk about the unemployment rate of black men, about the education achievements of black men or the lack thereof, right? You have a situation where Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, if you don't know him, you should get to know him, where he talks about black males are massively underdeveloped at every level of analysis. So imagine that you intentionally underdevelop somebody and then have the expectations of them that you have of everybody else. So I watch a lot of movies, obviously. There is a movie called Gladiator. Very good movie. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. But anyway, there's a scene in the movie where where the king, where the Caesar was gonna fight the gladiator, what they call a Spaniard. He was gonna fight him. So he went down in the dungeon. He had him chained up with his arms like up, and so he's like stuck a spear in his side, right? Not too deep to kill him, but just deep enough where it's gonna impact him being able to fight. Like the longer the fight goes, it is gonna kill him. That injury is gonna kill him. And so, but nobody can see the injury. So now he's in the arena and he's fighting this guy who has all of his senses, all of his capacities, all of his skills, while you're fighting the guy who you injured. And that's how we get gaslighted as black men in this society, right? Is that we get damaged from birth, right? From the cradle, from the cradle to the grave, we're getting gaslighted. We're being told why black men killing each other, why black men doing this. It's always why black men. But never is there any focus whatsoever about the underdevelopment of black men, right? We know they're being underdeveloped. And so we have these expectations on black men that don't match their development, And then the entire society, including black women, gaslight us about what they want, because what they want from us. There's something they want from us. Not they're trying to love us, not they're trying to care about us, right? Because if you love and care about somebody, you understand that they are underdeveloped, and then you give them support in that area to bring them where they have the capacity to be. But that's not what we're doing. So I've heard imams trash black men in these hoods, right? Imams trash black men in these hoods. Like, you don't know nothing about their life, man. You don't know what they've gone through. Yeah, black men killing each other, man. But have you ever been a black man that had to survive out here on these streets? Like in these streets for real, where your mom is there, you live in a ghetto, you live in the projects, you have no way of controlling your environment. What else are you supposed to do? You trying to protect and defend yourself at whatever the cost. Why? Because of all this structural stuff that has happened around you that everybody act like didn't happen. Everybody's acting like it didn't happen. The conversation never comes up. So all down my Facebook page, I see, what about black on black crime? What about black on black crime? Like, man, we create a Hunger Games context and then point the finger at the participants of the Hunger Games, right? We know already what these schools are doing to black boys. How about we address that before we hold the men who were once those boys accountable? Right? We live in a country, man, that made it illegal for black people to read. Of course, we're going to be behind. That means we are old. We are owed something that is going to make us full human beings. And we haven't been given that. We haven't been given that. And so while obviously I live in a black community, it's my culture, it's my context, I may find myself in a position where I have to protect myself from a black man. But even if I have to protect myself from a black man, I still have love for that black man. Even if I have to protect myself from a black woman, I still have love for the black woman. Why? Because I know the experience that they've gone to, and it's not their fault that they're here, right? And some people would say, well, what about you? You made it out. I know, man, but I had people helping me and supporting me along the way. Even though I suffer some of the difficulties, I had people supporting me. We all don't have that support, man. And we need to have a little bit more compassion for the circumstances of black men and black women, right? Because sometimes black men are hard on black women, man, and it just don't make sense, man. It don't make sense. Like, there's data, I'm not going to present it here, of the experience of black women that if you knew and you understood, your attitude about black women should be changed. I would like to refer you to a book called, oh man, I forgot the book.
Speaking of books, while you're looking, people must read this.
Oh, yes, that's a must read, and you'll really understand. And let me just say about this book, it's very jarring. It's very jarring. As I read it, I had to pause for a second and be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that this is what happened." But you'll come to see if you take a look. The name of the book was called. Give me a second. Find it here. I'm sorry about this. I should have had this ready already.
All right.
Were there any questions that anybody had?
No, it was no more questions. While you're looking for that, I recall the story of when my father was, he might have been not even 20 yet, maybe late teens, and he was working and I think it was a supervisor or somebody at that level or higher. And the way they told him, even just thinking of putting in the context of this gaslighting, the way they told him, they said, being black, you guys should be, you got it easy. You don't have to be the bosses or anything like that, you know.
Wow. So and those things. So when we talk about gaslighting, because I need you to understand, gaslighting is everywhere and all the time. It's everywhere and all the time. Almost everybody is trying to gaslight you. And depending on where you are in the hierarchy is going to determine how much gaslighting you're going to have imposed upon you. And because the black man is at the bottom of every metric, he's going to be gaslighted the most. So the name of the book was called At the Dark End of the Street: Black Women, Rape, and Resistance, a New History of the Civil Rights Movements from Rosa Parks to the Rise of Black Power. The author is Danielle L. McGuire. It's a very good book. And I don't know how you can be a black man and read that book, or any man or any woman for that matter, and read that book and not have a level of compassion for the things that black women have had to go through in order for us to even have the opportunity to be where we are right now. And so for us, I often tell people in a lot of immigrant communities, women are being severely gaslighted by the men, severely gaslighted by the men. There's no room for that in the African American masjid, because our women have been side by side with us through every step of our process in this. We've gone a little bit off course now, but I'm just saying what the history is. And if we can have a little bit more compassion for each other, given what our history has been and where we are trying to be, then I think we can get back on track as black men and black women, and having truly sincere, loving relationships between each other, and creating this loving community that we all know we have the capacity to be.
With that in mind, don't let anybody gaslight y'all from not watching the Black Imams Roundtable. People might tell you we don't need black imams. We're all one ummah. It's very important work. We gotta lead. We gotta lead ourselves. Black Muslims have to lead ourselves, and so those imams, are doing the work. So please support the ones.
Absolutely, and it's important. It's critical, because despite the fact that we are one ummah, when you talk about leadership of your communities, you need a leadership that can reflect the experience in which it is leading. And these other people cannot lead us because they don't know our history. They don't know our experience. And I'm just telling you, sometimes black people, we can be slick. We can be slick, and we'll outmaneuver and manipulate and gaslight these immigrant Muslims. Like I've seen black people immigrate. I've seen black people use the immigrant community to gaslight by proxy, because they don't know. They're not as savvy as we are about ourselves and our own interactions. And so when you talk about black Muslim leadership, it is imperative. If Islam is going to survive in this country, it is imperative that we have leadership in the indigenous community that reflects a wealth of knowledge in regards to our experience here as Americans, since we've been here in 1619, right? Nobody knows America better than us. And so if Islam is going to survive here, it's going to survive as us being Muslim and knowing America. And nobody else. That's just us. Only we can do that. And so don't, as you said, don't let nobody gaslight you out your rights. Allah put us through that experience, and Allah intends for us to maximize the potential of that experience in a way that nobody else can. So, alhamdulillah for that.
Alhamdulillah. I think that's about all I have. If there's anything else that you might want to talk to, or if not, we can wrap up. And
no, I enjoyed the much respects to the platform that was presented. To the studio that you're in, all thanks to everybody who helped in, alhamdulillah, that we were able to have this conversation. I think we need to have more of them. I think we need to go into a little bit more detail about narcissism and cluster B personality disorders and our family structures, and talking about how all of this stuff is just one ball of the same energy that is not helpful to what our objective is as Muslims in America, and more specifically, making sure that we are facilitating the type of man that Allah intended amongst the men that we have the ability to influence, and that's going to be ADOS, the African American community. So thank you for the opportunity, brother, and I hope I've been helpful to anyone. As you said, if anybody have any questions, post the questions, and I'll respond to the comments later, or whatever the case may be. But I'm grateful for the opportunity, and alhamdulillah for you putting this together, brother.
Alhamdulillah for you as well. So thanks everybody for listening, and I'll be in touch. I'll definitely be in touch with you, brother.
Absolutely.
If something comes up, we can, like I said, it's just only the beginning. There's more to discuss, and go deeper on these issues and stuff. These conversations that must be had, so we ask people not to hold back and ask the questions, even if you might disagree or something, please ask, so we can discuss, and we'll close out from there. We ask that Allah continue to guide you all, guide us, forgive us for anything that was said wrong, and anything that we said right was only due to His mercy, and He is worthy of all praise. So, silent Fatiha, we'll close.
I mean,
Peace to all. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.